One of my favorite anecdotes about the production of literature comes from the Indian work, the Pañcatantra, which I'm probably mispronouncing, and I apologize. But it's a collected work of the second century, roughly, in India. And the story goes, as written in the prologue to this work, that a court Brahmin, a scholar, was charged with educating three half-wit princes in the art of statecraft, in teaching them how to be good leaders. They're going to grow up, they're going to run things, and they're a little slow. They don't really have a lot of time for all the really heavy reading. So we want to condense that. We want to make it approachable. We want to make it so that they can understand it to begin with, and perhaps hold on to that knowledge for more than 5 minutes after they read it. And so Vishnu Sarman, this Brahmin, crafted all of these stories. A lot of them are not original. A lot of them have long precedents and antecedents from far away. You see a lot of the same stories occurring back many years in India, in the Jataka. Many of them are surface in the Fables of Aesop. They are all these very short narratives that convey usually a kind of moral. They are fables in that sense. You get an awful lot of talking animals, a lot of anthropomorphism of all kinds. You get a more sophisticated development than Aesop and the Jataka in its use of a frame tale. You get there are characters. A frame tale is essentially stories nested within one another, where you're telling a story, and in that story, a character starts telling a story, and perhaps a character in that story also starts telling a story, and it becomes a kind of Hall of Mirrors effect. It's the sort of thing that will be exploited to great effect in the Thousand and One Nights in the Arabian tradition. Again, the sense of cross pollination of all of these narrative devices is fascinating and a lot of fun too, quite frankly. The stories themselves are all fairly short. And the selection we have in the Norton anthology is select, and it's a little hard to get a sense of the frame tale aspect of it, where two characters start telling and trying to make a point. But the values that come out, the morals that come out in each of the stories is really pretty interesting the way it goes. The first one that we have is from a collection. The book is divided into 5 chapters, and each one is dealing with a different aspect of not just geopolitics, but it reduces everything of international concern, let's say, that princes and emperors would have to know about, to very quick, identifiable, relational characteristics. And the first one we have is from a group called The Loss of Friends. And in this, you can, of course, deduce that, well, friends can also be allies, different nations, different groups. How can we trust one another? How can we deal with one another? How can we deal with the loss of friends? And the first story that we have is an adorable little story about leap and creep. Where there is a female louse named Creep, surviving in the bed of a king and living a pretty good life. Creep is a little matriarch, and they go and they nibble on the king's blood a little every night, just somewhere very subtle, usually in his foot or something like that. Something very manageable, something very polite, something not too noticeable, just low intensity and going along with it. Hence the name creep. It's a sign of incrementalism. It's a sign of being modest in one's appetites and fitting into society. The first line of it comes as a kind of proverb. These stories tend to be chock full of proverbs and little sayings and homey expressions that are probably very current in the world at the time, and give a sense of the popular nature of these things. And it says, "With no stranger share your house. Leap the flea, killed creep the louse." This catchy little rhyme. And it is the story of a flea who invades the bed. The flea is named Leap. Leap is, let's say, non-incremental in name choice. Somebody who is trying to get ahead very quickly, very ambitious perhaps, very aggressive, coloring outside the lines, to use another metaphor. But also the notion of "with no stranger share your house." Automatically puts a kind of tribalistic frame on the story as it unfolds. No stranger share your house. The story is that Leap invades this nice little domestic situation for Creep, and Creep ends up getting killed. Where is the geopolitical lesson in that? Well, I think you have to say that, well, okay, how much are you going to tolerate invaders? How much are you going to tolerate people who burst in? How much are you going to tolerate people who don't respect the way things are done, the conventions of tradition, and try and burst through that? Rules and propriety matter in this this moral, I would say. And it ends with this little with another little quick little line. As fate would have it, they came upon Creep as she crouched in the nap of the fabric, and killed her with her family. Her entire family gets wiped out because of this essentially this chain of events that began with the invasion of Leap. And that is why I say, with no stranger share your house, and the rest of it. And you get this ending that ends in a kind of homily, in a kind of moral that you would be used to seeing in like an Aesop, where it ends in an ellipse, ... where, let no stranger share your house, ... yada, yada, yada. Yeah, okay. Interesting. Why that? Why an ellipse? Why not say the whole thing and then actually say, "and the rest of it"? Yeah. You know. Well, what is the effect of that? Well, to say "and the rest of it" suggests that perhaps the reader knows the moral, knows the rest of it. Automatically, that suggests a certain insularity, a certain insiderness, a certain tribalism. We don't have to explain to you what the rest of it is, because you know, because we all know, because we are all one people, and we are not them. They are the outsiders. They are the interlopers. They are the people who are trying to get into our nice little bed where we all suckle off the blood of the king in polite little hierarchical orders. Or is it making fun of that? Is it suggesting that yada yada yada? Yeah, these little bromides are in fact quite tired. These little bromides are kind of pointless. These are empty little sayings that don't even merit expression incomplete. It is a subtle little way to dislocate the reader and say, well, I'm not sure how to take this. How much irony should I read this with? How much validity should I give the story, or or should I focus more on the telling of the story and the manner of the story in which it is told? Does the story carry all of the value? But there are so many levels of telling going on here. Remember, the frame tale complicates it. It highlights the fact that this is a story, that this is a story being told within a story being told within a story within a story, and all of this complication piled on top of one another so that you're never quite sure of your relationship to the core narrative. Is it just a story? Is it just a story about a couple of talking bugs? How seriously should anyone take that? Is the story making fun of anyone who would take that seriously? Again, think of that construct of, you know, the Brahmin trying to teach the half-wit princes. Is he mocking them in that vein right there? I don't know. It's very, very ambiguous, and that's part of the fun. The Blue Jackal traces a story of a jackal who falls into a vat of blue dye. The coloration is taken by fellow beasts as a sign of well, God-given endorsement of political rule. The jackal demands tribute from the lions and all the other beasts, and says, "Okay, you know, you owe me. You're all working for me. Yes, I am a god." And he even looks down on his fellow jackals, and you know, "Oh, you common little ugly beasts. You know, you're nothing." And that is a mistake. At a certain point, his natural instinct for howling, as jackals do, takes over, and he reveals himself. His inherent nature is immutable. Regardless of what he looks like on the outside, regardless of the trappings, his inherent nature did not change. And so he reveals himself to be, at bottom, a jackal. And that is, of course, the seed of his destruction. Everybody else realizes, hey, you're just an ordinary jackal, and yeah, okay, you turn blue. That's weird, but you're just a jackal. And by now, he has sacrificed his friends of the other jackals and made enemies by mistreating, let's say, or pretending to be superior to all the other animals. So that brings about his destruction. But just think about that relationship again to nature. You cannot escape nature. He, the jackal, could not escape his own nature. It is irreversible. Think about what that means for a society. Think about what that means for a inherently hierarchical society like India, with the caste system, where you cannot necessarily rise. There is no such thing as social mobility in the caste system as we know it. The inherent nature of people is fixed, and so you cannot change them. You cannot improve them. That's what the story seems to be saying. But again, it ends with, and that is what I say, whoever leaves his friends, ... referring to the jackal betraying the other jackals, and the rest of it. That ellipsis, again, ironizes the whole thing. It suggests, I don't know how to take this. I don't know where my relationship is to this material. I'm a little bit at a loss. the complications make it uncertain. But think of this as an educational tool as well. If the idea is to give three half-wit princes something to think about in a small, bite-sized morsel, again, these are very catchy, little, adorable stories. Many of them familiar from other traditions, many of them familiar from bedtime stories for generations upon generations. Couching them in specific ways that are meant to prompt thought, because it is the grand liberal arts tradition to think about things in certain ways and practice your rationality, your ability to deconstruct complex fields of information and draw new conclusions for new situations, to always be able to turn something around. There is no stable knowledge in this, despite the fact that the entire hierarchy of a civilization is based on stability and wants to encourage it. So that just further complicates this notion of how do we do this? You get a nice little story of forethought, ready wit, and fatalist. Excuse me. The three fish who want to avoid getting caught. They hear that somebody's going to come, that a fisherman is going to come and drain the lake or something. And they respond in different ways. And of course, their names are very obviously labels for different ways of going about a problem. The forethought, somebody who thinks ahead, spoiler alert, he survives because he thinks ahead, forethought, and he does the responsible thing, and he does the best job of, he comes out the best of all three. The ready wit, somebody who is ready with his wit, somebody who is smart and can think on his feet, might not think things ahead, but can improvise on the spot. Things go a little bit bumpier for him, but still he gets out of it. Fatalist is somebody who says, well, what's going to happen is going to happen. What are you going to do? He dies. That brings destruction. And the story is very obviously an emphasis on statecraft, on the ability to prepare for the crises that come up and how you handle them. Do you just throw up your hands and say, well, what am I going to do? I can't do anything. That often does not go well. But somebody who thinks about it ahead of time, somebody who strategizes, somebody who prepares, those people tend to do the best. Those people tend to come out the best. The political and military challenges of a prince, of a emperor, can be broken down into these three little modes of ruling, and how effective you can be. A number of the stories are a little bit more sophisticated. Some of them are a little bit longer. They tend to have more characters. They tend to have more involved plots. The mouse made mouse is another one, where a mouse is transformed into a girl who, when she becomes of marriageable age, her parents, who made her into the girl, her parents have to go around and find princes who will marry her, and or good matches, let's say, and they go around trying to find a suitable husband, which in a traditional society is a parent's job, to find a suitable husband for the girl. And they go around, and she doesn't like him. She doesn't like him. Oh, this one, no, that one I don't like. And this one, she's got her ideas. But when she sees a mouse, she falls in love. First sight. That's what I want. Because it's her nature. And the parents have to say, okay. And they transform her back into a mouse. And she reverts to her nature. Those things don't change. That is a consistent theme. The ass and the tiger skin, and the is another story of of disguise, of appearances, of being taken in, the ability to try and disguise yourself, and again, appear to be something different than who you are, ultimately fails. A donkey dresses up in a tiger skin so that he can go wander out into the field and eat the crops without being disturbed. A farmer might chase off a donkey, but if you see a tiger wandering around there, okay, I'm just going to let him go about his business. But at a certain point, the donkey brays. He reverts to his nature, and the jig is up. He is discovered for his true identity, and he is killed by the farmers he had robbed. The bird with the golden dung, another variation on the goose with the golden egg. It's a bit of a twist. A hunter finds a bird who poops gold and presents it to the king. The bird essentially fools the king a couple of times, he fools a couple of different people to get out of the captivity, because he is pretending to be a fool. He says, I played the fool at first, then he who had me on his tether, and then the king and counselor, we all were fools together. After which he took his carefree flight through the atmosphere. And that is why I say I played the fool at first, ... and the rest of it. And again, that uncertain reality, or that uncertain relationship, rather, to the story coming, and we're not quite sure how to take it. How does one treat sudden fortune? How does one react to it? Does one get swept up in greed, but not see the machinations of people along the way? Do we just follow people blindly? There are a number of complications that come up in this story that are very unusual, let's say. The Loyal Mongoose is another story of reverting to nature, where a mongoose and a infant are raised as siblings. Don't ask. But the wife, the mother, charges the father with keeping an eye on the two of them, because she's always a little bit suspicious. And the father, being a professor, is completely incompetent. As a professor and a father, I can agree that is our nature. The father is completely incompetent, and he just leaves him alone. He goes outside. He just says, "Oh, okay, I gotta go." He's got things to do. He has to go beg, because that's what fathers and professors have to do. So he leaves, and a snake comes into the child's room, and the mongoose protects it, or protects the child, by killing the snake. But then, by killing the snake, the mongoose becomes covered in blood, and when the mother comes home, she first sees the mongoose covered in blood and realizes, or believes she realizes, oh my God, he killed my child, as she had suspected. And so she kills the mongoose. She soon recognizes the error, and you get a little tragedy in that. But it's just curious some of the values that are being exposed here. There is a kind of prejudice against against the professor and the father. There is a kind of prejudice against the woman. She comes off as emotional and irrational and too quick in her judgments. She lashes out and destroys what had actually saved her child. It deals with greed very explicitly. She upgrades her husband, the Brahmin, who had just come home afterwards. She says, "Greedy, greedy," she cried, "because you do not do as I told you. You must now taste the bitterness of a son's death, the fruit of the tree of your own wickedness. This is what happens to those blinded by greed." It sort of gets retrofitted. The story, which again probably comes from an older oral tradition, perhaps, seems to have an uneasy relationship with this position of greed. Certainly, yeah, the priest, the father, or the Brahmin, the father, the professor, goes out to beg. This is what he has to do. Again, things don't change. But he ignores his core responsibility for his own material gain, let's say. And here it ends with a full verse, which is curious that it doesn't do the yada yada ellipsis at the end. "Indulge in no excessive greed, a little helps in time of need. A greedy fellow in the world found on his head a wheel that whirled." So that automatically segues you into the very next story of this frame-tale construction. But still, there's complication there, because even as they're sitting there thundering against greed, greed is so wrong, in the first two lines of that, which is what is sort of providing the commentary on this story before it segues into the next of those four. The first two deal with this story, the next two deal with the next story. But indulge in no excessive greed, a little helps in time of need, in parentheses. Again, very cute, catchy little rhymes, the sort of thing that can ring around in your head. But what kind of advice is that? What kind of clarity is that? No excessive greed. Well, a little bit of greed is good. How do you measure that? The Brahmin in this case was going out to beg for food. So, is that greed? He has to eat. A little helps in time of need. Again, that complication. Well, okay, so sometimes it's okay to be greedy. What does that mean? There are no clear-cut answers. For a moralistic literature, for a literature that is essentially fables, that is trying to drive certain core values, that is very vague. That is very debatable. That is less Aesop and more Hebrew Bible in the way it's supposed to be argued about, in the way it suggests its own nuance. There is complication there. And that is the point. All of these stories together are meant to be argued about. All of these stories together are meant to be seen in contradistinction to one another, because they're going over very difficult human problems. Yes, they are on a large scale supposed to be teaching young half-wits how to run a nation, how to run an empire. But they are dealing on such small, metaphoric, human-related levels that there are no simple answers. This is about humanity. This is about how do I make decisions in my day-to-day life? How do I deal with other people and get along? There's nothing all of that oracular being offered here. There's no finality. When you read something like the Analects of Confucius, there is something so certain in what he's saying. These can be debated as well philosophically. They stay a little bit vague, but they always get offered. The advice is always offered in fairly concrete and absolutist terms. Abstract, so they can be debated, but still there's something so confident in what is being said. Here, that confidence is completely undercut by the form. The form of the telling suggests, well, we're not sure how to take this. How much irony is being imported here? How much complication? How much should I dwell on the frame rather than the internal story? What does it mean? But it is this process, it is this thought, this complication, these nuances that you're supposed to puzzle out, that train your mind to deal with all of the complications that come up in life, because you're not going to get these stories in life. Life is going to present other not exact fit problems. And you need to be able to work in that realm. You need to be able to associate and say, well, okay, this is kind of like this. So it would mean that if I did this, this might occur as an outcome. But it's also a little like this. So that comes with another set of dynamics that produce another set of possible outcomes if I behave in a certain way. So what is the best fit? How can I choose from all of these examples to come up with a workable solution for my here and now? Which is what politics is, which is what leadership is. We're all confronting stuff that never happened before in one way or another. Every problem is unique in its own way. Having a frame of reference that we can negotiate within, at least a way of thinking about it and getting your head around it, that helps. That helps in empirical geopolitics, figuring out the fate of nations, and it helps in just dealing with other people, one-on-one. How do we get along in the world?